think like a big part of being a founder is getting sort of 70-80% knowledge. And you don't need to be like an expert in anything, but you need to learn a little bit about everything. So what I really want to see in the world 10 years from now is for there to be as many robotics businesses as there are like SaaS businesses today.
Adrian, coffee, tea, or something else? What fuels your mornings?
It's been coffee lately, but I do love a good tea.
Yeah,
It's
it's the
yeah, tea is a much more even buzz. You know, coffee you have some and then you need more and then you need more and then you're not sleeping at night and yeah,
that's true. I've been trying to drink more tea recently, but the Nespresso makes it too easy with the
yeah,
little
exactly,
pod, and
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
I need the tea equivalent. Um, when you were a kid, what did you think you'd grow up to be?
I'm actually on the record as saying that I wanted to be a computer programmer at about age 8 or something. There's a video of me. It was,
Wow,
yeah, right from the. I mean, I don't know. I've been playing with computers since I was, the neighbor's computer when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was always just like drawn to computers, and
that's
for some reason thought a computer programmer was a good job. So here we
yeah.
are.
There you go.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's pretty
yeah.
consistent throughout life then.
Yeah, yeah. It's not as quite as much as we just was interviewing RJ Scaringe from the CEO of Rivian at our conference the other day, and he's got a crazy story. From like age 10, he knew he wanted to start a car company, and just like his entire
Really?
it informed like he decided like where he went to college and everything was just because he wanted to start a car company. So every decision was how is this going to help him? And then like age 26, he started a car company.
That's pretty crazy. Which conference was
Yeah.
that?
Actuate. So we
Oh,
ran
it was.
this. Yeah. So we ran a robotics developer conference a couple months ago. It's our second year running it now, and yeah, we had a bunch of mostly very technical speakers, but RJ was one of our fireside chats there.
Love that. Yeah, I'm very sad to have missed it again. Hopefully
Next
next
time,
year.
yeah,
Yes, hopefully next year. I heard nothing but great things about it, and obviously for the second year running and being completely sold out and with a wait list and such a great
yeah,
lineup. I mean, you guys are
yeah.
definitely doing
RJ
something
was
right.
great. Yeah. Bigger and better next year, though. No looking
Awesome.
back.
Good. I'm looking forward to it. What's one technology that you can't live without?
I mean, it's probably a little cliche now, but the ChatGPT is just. I
Yeah.
don't do anything without consulting ChatGPT now. It is wild. Like I used to spend so much time like bugging my team or people I knew for, especially as a founder. I think like a big part of being a founder is getting vaguely familiar with a bunch of areas and things that you start out knowing very little about and getting yourself up to like sort of 70-80% knowledge. And you don't need to be like an expert in anything, but you need to learn a little bit about everything. And so I used to spend a lot of time just messaging, anyone I knew, asking to try and like build a mental model because there's a lot of things that are not very Googleable, or you Google them and there's just eight
Yeah.
pages of blog spam, or you find a blog that explains like mostly what you wanted to know, but there's no way to ask a follow up question. So I used to spend a lot of time asking people these things. Now I just spend a lot of time back and forth with the chat GPT, making sure I have a vague understanding of things. Which,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so powerful, isn't it? I really like now Google. That's always my default, even though I use ChatGPT every day. But now they have their AI summary from
yeah,
what
yeah.
they.
It's a lot faster than yeah. Sometimes chat if it's like more of a whole question I want to answer, but a lot of the
Yes,
stuff the AI summary and Google, yeah, they must be
really
punishing
good.
to everyone that used to rely on Google traffic. Now you just read what Google tells you.
I read an article about that actually, that there's a lot of pushback about that AI summary because people's click through rates have just dramatically
Plummeted, yeah,
dropped.
yeah,
Yeah,
because they're just
yeah,
answering the question that you wanted to answer. So yeah, I mean
exactly.
it's better for the end user, but yeah, too bad if you were most of the people that were relying on traffic from Google, though, let's be honest, over the past few years leading up to that, were pretty garbage websites. Like it
It
was a lot of
was,
just
yeah.
SEO
Adverts.
industry was like late
Yeah,
stage SEO industry was terrible.
really. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
Um, all right, last one of these icebreakers. If you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact that your work's had on the world, what would you want that to be?
accelerating the robotics industry has really been that was the founding premise of Foxglove, was that we're building this cloud infrastructure, this software infrastructure to support robotics development, support the robotics industry. And historically, this is something that exists in-house at like the largest AV companies. But the founding premise of Foxglove was that the robotics industry cannot move forward unless more of the stuff is available off the shelf. So what I really want to see in the world 10 years from now is for there to be as many robotics businesses as there are like SaaS businesses today. Like today, there are just, you can start a SaaS business because you don't have to build anything from scratch. You go and just glue together some off-the-shelf components, some off-the-shelf infrastructure, and you go and like focus on product market fit and solve a problem for your customers. Today in robotics, you have these like blindingly obvious product market fit problems of like, well, if the forklift drives itself, like that'll be amazing. Can you make it do that though? And so you have
Yeah.
all of these like really obvious kind of product problems that you solve, but you have these like very big R&D challenges of like, can you make the robot do the thing that you promised it was going to do? So yeah, I mean, really like our mission has always been at Foxglove, and what I hope will be different 10 years from the world now is that most people, that a good founder 10 years from now should be able to start a robotics business where they take mostly off the shelf hardware, mostly off the shelf AI models, again, with a little bit of modifications, some off the shelf hardware with some modifications, and off the shelf AI models with some fine tuning, and off the shelf infrastructure. And then like go solve a problem for your customers. Go build a product. You should not be like spending all of this time in R&D.
Love that. Wow. Well, welcome to Machine Minds, everyone. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Adrian Macneil, co-founder and CEO of Foxglove. Thanks for getting on the show today, Adrian.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Let's jump into it. Has been a long time coming.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while, so glad to
Yeah.
finally come on the show.
Me too. Glad to have you here. So let's take a step back, because obviously we want to dive into Foxglove and everything for people that aren't too familiar. But you've had a really interesting path in your career across engineering, leadership, software infrastructure, developer tooling, etc. But can you walk us through some of those key chapters that shaped your approach to building?
Yeah, I think going way back early on in my career, I spent a lot of time around e-commerce. I spent a lot of time working with payment gateways. This is going back a little way, but I got quite early on interested in Bitcoin. So back around kind of 2013, 2014, when Bitcoin first came out. First of all, I dismissed it as a scam, as everybody does when they first hear about it. They're like, "That's insane.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?" But then because I had spent so much time building payment gateways and e-commerce stuff, and realizing how annoying the existing sort of legacy payment infrastructure is, I got quite excited about this idea of programmable money. And so I started, looking into it more and realized that there was something interesting there. And so around 2014, I moved out to San Francisco and I took a job at Coinbase. And so that was my first kind of like Bay Area startup that I was working at. And it was everything I wanted it to be. It was, especially in the early days, it was growing like crazy. But I still stayed at Coinbase for most of 2014, 2015. That's actually where I met my co-founder at Foxglove. Roman was at Coinbase. He was there building the trading exchange at the time. But I burned out in the crypto industry relatively quick because I had real trouble sort of explaining like the value that people were going to get from this. The crypto space was kind of weird in that it attracts a lot of people that are looking for make a quick buck. There's a lot of scammers. There's a lot of people doing sort of gray market, black market type things. There's a lot of, all of the banks hated us and the IRS hated us, and because we were not doing a good enough job of KYC and AML and things like this. So it was just a really sort of tough space to be in. But more than that, I guess I fundamentally struggled with elaborating on like what value the world was going to get from this. And so coming out of that, my co-founder Roman actually left Coinbase first, and he went over to Cruise and was saying, "I'm going to go work on self-driving cars." And this was early 2016, and I thought that was crazy because Bitcoin was crazy, but like cars driving itself was even crazier. But he pulled me in, and so I joined Cruise in 2016. And at the time, we when I joined, there was about 2 vehicles, and they could not turn left; they could only turn right. So I went out, joined the company, and then hey, all right, I'm like
Just go around in
first week of the company,
circles.
let's go for a drive. And then I was like, if you want to make a left turn, we have to make 3 rights. And I was like, wait, really? You guys haven't even done the left turn feature yet? Like, oh, wow, this is gonna be a long
That's so
journey.
funny.
But the thing that kind of drew me into Cruise, apart from the big vision, well, I guess there was 2 things. One is that really being able to, really feeling like I could see the value of that as a product, right? It's like explaining to people why they trying to explain to your parents like why they want Bitcoin in their life when they already have a bank account and credit card. It's like, especially in like a developed Western country, that's sort of a hard thing to sell. Explaining to people like that the car drives itself, and so you don't have to drive it anymore is like immediately obvious what the value is there. So that was one thing. The other thing, though, that really drew me in was the kind of the infrastructure and the data challenge. So I come from a background of building web software and infrastructure and systems. I had not had any exposure back then, 10 years ago, to any sort of like AI or robotics development or things like that. And I assumed that people working on a self-driving car would be sort of genius. This is that knew all of the stuff I knew, plus all of these other things. But what is probably obvious in hindsight is that a lot of the people that were working, a lot of the AI sort of machine learning PhDs, a lot of the controls PhDs, a lot of the engineers that are designing the algorithms and models and things to make the car drive themselves. A lot of those people don't have as much exposure to building a lot of the cloud infrastructure and the back-end systems that are going to support all of these vehicles and manage the fleet and manage updates and manage collecting data and logs and bringing it back and making it searchable and training the models and all of what we kind of consider infrastructure in the software space. So that really drew me into Cruise. Both the fact that there was obviously a big need for it, but also the fact that there were some really big unsolved problems. There was not an existing playbook for how you should put together a sort of developer infrastructure for a self-driving car. There were not blog posts. You can't go read about companies that have been doing this for years and how they approached it. There was just a lot of unsolved problems that we needed to go and figure out kind of from first principles. And so that was another big part of what originally drew me into Cruise.
Interesting. Yeah, it was when you cast your mind back like 10 years ago to self-driving. I was spoken about it a few times on the show with the comparisons to like humanoids, right? Like the early days of self-driving and how far the technology needed to come to even be considered like prime time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
the humanoid industry today reminds me so much of where self-driving was around 2017, where there is this incredible potential you can see. And it's hard to see, how far away that was going to be. And if for those that were following self-driving industry around sort of 2017, there was a lot of kind of the general perception was split between some people that are saying, oh, this is 30 years away. It's so far away, we shouldn't even worry about it. And then this like huge chunk of the media and people saying that like every Uber driver is going to be out of a job like next summer kind of thing. And I feel like that's a little bit of what's going on with humanoids today, right? It's like there's a lot of, you go and read your average kind of, media article and you would be under the impression that every form of human labor is going to be gone sometime next year. Because the humanoids are just going to come and do it all. And that is like a realistic long-term concern. But for right now, it takes years to develop these things and to iron out, to building the hardware is challenging, but it's not the biggest challenge. You build the software that can actually solve these problems. The AI and the models and the software that can actually make it take an abstract task and then go solve it is very, very challenging. And then even once you do that, there's this massive long tail of rollout. I mean, we have had self-driving cars with no one in the front seat for 4 or 5 years now in San Francisco. They're still not ubiquitous. Even in San Francisco, they still can't even drive in the whole Bay Area. They're still only in maybe 10 cities nationwide. It takes a long time to actually really like roll these things out as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think people very much underestimate that. but it makes for good press. So there we
Right,
go.
right. Yeah, the
More
articles
SEO.
of the middle of the road articles don't really get you anywhere.
They don't. They don't.
So that was, yeah, but that was a great ride. I mean, I left Cruise in sort of late 2020, so it was before more of the later stumbles and things happened with Cruise as a company, and before GM ultimately decided to roll it into their in-house ADAS program. But I
Yeah.
left sort of around, um, towards the end of my time there, and through into 2020, I really started talking to other people in the industry and having chats with people at Waymo and Tesla and Aurora, and saying, what are you guys doing? And you sort of compare notes, and you realize that we had all invented like basically identical tooling, or very, very similar things had been kind of invented at all of the different top self-driving companies. And these are companies that had billions of dollars to spend, and they had hundreds of engineers they could kind of put on these challenges. But then I started thinking about how, if we have a car that can drive itself around San Francisco, how many other things out in the world could be automated that are not automated today? How
Yeah.
many, why do we have a car driving around San Francisco and we don't have self-driving tractors in empty fields? There are so many things that could be automated. And my experience at Cruise made me feel very strongly that the infrastructure and the sort of the data infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure was one of the biggest things holding that industry back, because it's kind of the bottom of the iceberg that needs to exist to support, to support a smaller number of very, very smart ML engineers figuring out, and this is also would be true at any kind of, OpenAI or any kind of research lab today, is that if you want to build these large production systems, a lot of the effort is going into the data and the infrastructure and the continuous learning loop that's letting you capture all of this real world information, feed that into your training, label it, feed it into your training, get the performance back out, decide which approach is working better or not. All of that needed to exist at the AV companies, and the robotics industry cannot really move forward unless you make that available off the shelf too.
Yeah. So true. I guess when you look at it that way, and after the experiences you've had and conversations you've had, it was probably like glaringly obvious, like this is needed. And
yeah, it was
yeah,
very obvious to me. It was a very non-consensus pitch to venture capitalists in 2021. If you think back to
yeah,
this was the heyday of kind of zero interest rate phenomenon, and there was a lot of investment into crypto and NFTs and things. But it was before this. Now there's a real narrative around how manufacturing and robotics and all of these things are important. But 5 years
yeah,
ago, that was sort of very non-consensus, and I got a lot of skepticism from investors around sort of basically robotics was seen back then as a money-losing pit, and that every basically startup that they'd ever had their hopes up about in robotics that they'd invested money into had failed, generally
yeah,
speaking. A lot of the sort of era of robotics companies that were founded in the 2010s, some of them are still around, but the vast majority of them did not survive.
right.
They were too soon. They were trying to take on like too big of a technical challenge, and they weren't able to make it. So the fact that we were going to build developer tools for this like failure of an industry was kind of like not a great pitch. But I didn't
Yeah,
really care. I guess like I
you had
believe strongly
conviction.
in the potential of robotics, and so there was a big open question about like how long it will take to how long it would be until the industry takes off. But it
Yeah,
wasn't a question of whether it will or not. It was just a question of when.
100%. Yeah, when I started my business, it was just over 6 years ago as well, and kind of
Yeah.
like doubled down on robotics. People were like,
They're like, what are you
"Why?
talking about? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" And I couldn't give you a really good answer, but I just had conviction, and it's cool. Like
Right.
who
Right.
isn't interested in robotics or even
Right.
conceptually? But I always tell people, if I worked for someone else, if I had another employer, there's no way they would have let me do this market
Right.
or build it
Right.
out
Right.
like that. It just wasn't there.
But that's, I mean,
Um,
all of the best opportunities I think in life are like that, right? Like the consensus bets always have. So it's like anything today that is applying LLMs to a traditional industry is like it's so consensus that like every
right.
idea has 18 people all trying to build it at once, and you sort
Yeah.
of you do these kind of non-consensus bets where you have a strong belief about something, Um, maybe it's higher risk. I don't know. I don't really think of it as like being necessarily higher risk as long as you're right. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you're right, it's all fine. Um, well, let's take a step back actually, and just for people who aren't familiar with Foxglove and who are still trying to get their head around from everything we spoke about, what you guys actually do. Like, is there an
yeah.
elevator pitch or just a highlight of why it's such a game changer for robotics companies?
Yeah, so I like to say that we're building a data platform for robotics. So we help our software helps companies with collecting and logging uh, multimodal data, which I'll get to in a second, at the edge. So you're collecting all of this data on robots, you're getting data off the robots, you're figuring out how to deal with the fact that most robots produce way too much data and they have very limited bandwidth because they're in a factory or a field or something like that. You're bringing that data to the cloud, you're making it searchable, indexable, you're trying to understand patterns in the robot's behavior, and quite often you're trying to debug failures. And so we have a whole multimodal visualization tool that lets you dig in and build a 3D scene of where the robot was and what were the things that it was tracking and what was it seeing through the cameras and maybe where it was on a map if it has GPS and things like that. And so a couple of things make this problem very unique in robotics. Like there's a lot of platforms out there that help you generally manage data. But in robotics, you have a couple of things that make it very different. One is the fact that it's multimodal. So this means rather than just like text logs or tabular data or time series data, you have video, you have 3D, you have point clouds, you have GPS, you have a lot of different kind of types of data. And so when you want to um, inspect that, you need to do it in a very visual way. That's kind of number one. Number two is that it's very heavyweight data and it's usually being recorded at the edge out in like a factory or field or something. So whereas a traditional kind of cloud application running on a server might be generating kilobytes or megabytes of data, you have a robot that's generating gigabytes or terabytes. A self-driving car could be producing a terabyte an hour of data or more. Um,
Wow.
and it's out there in the real world. It's not connected to like a fiber optic link to the cloud. Even if it was, that's quite often like not enough bandwidth. So you're recording, you're just producing way more data than you could ever hope to upload in a lot of cases. And so you need to think completely differently. Whereas in the cloud, a lot of data you stream it off to a service, and the service lets you produce all kind of beautiful analytics. With robotics, you need to think about logging this data on the robot. You need to think about some kind of rolling record buffer, or like it's almost like a black box, like flight data recorder. You need to collect the data locally, keep a buffer of it. You need to selectively upload if something went wrong or if there's some particular incident that is going to be worth investigating, or there's some particular demonstration or behavior that you want to feed into your training process, things like that. You need to be able to fetch this data. You need to be able to bring it to the edge. You need to be able to build up this library of data that's going to feed into your training, and you need to be able to debug it. So that's what I say, that we're ultimately a data platform for robotics and physical AI, as it is now called in 2025.
Awesome. Awesome. The the product is used, broad adoption, right? Autonomy, industrial robotics, logistics, etc. Was that the initial goal? Just like blanket robotics in general? Were you looking at certain markets specifically, like the AV market or something?
Yeah, the hypothesis from the beginning was that this would always that this would be very generally applicable to most types of robots. My experience was more in the AV industry and the self-driving car industry, and so there was, um, I guess, we needed to prove that as we went along. But the thesis right from the early days was that why would a self-driving car be really any different to a self-driving tractor or a self-driving forklift or a self-driving
Mm,
lawnmower? Um, there's slight differences even when you get to drones and aircraft and things like that, or surface like ocean vehicles, or even fixed position robots in a warehouse that are doing package sorting and palletization and things like that. At the end of the day, you're collecting a whole lot of multimodal sensor data. You've got a whole lot of different sensors. You're collecting that information. You're making some decisions about how to act on that information, and then you're like carrying out the action, whether that is steering or driving or manipulating. Um, and so the development process there ends up looking very similar across all of these things. Similar to how if you're, an e-commerce platform or something, you don't really care like what people are selling. Like it doesn't, doesn't really matter
Yeah.
what you're selling. It's like the workflow looks the same. Or if you're a data dog or something and you're helping people like monitor cloud infrastructure, similarly, you don't care if they're building an e-commerce website or a social network. It's just like a lot of these developer tools and developer platforms end up being very agnostic to the kind of end business. It's more about like what does the development workflow look like.
Interesting. And I guess at the time, it's kind of like a broader question, but at the time when you said, trying to pitch this idea to VCs and or have the industry side with it, it was probably like really out there, but you guys succeeded. You guys had conviction. You realized there was a big enough market or need there. How did you go about finding initial investors that aligned with that or understood the problem?
Yeah, there were. It's a good question, and I think everyone's path to early investment is different. For us, our earliest investors, Amplify, I had been talking to them for a number of years before we started the company, and just if you're especially in engineering or as even just working in tech, it can be quite good to build relationships with people in the investor community. Obviously, if you're going to start a company, that's useful. But even if you never plan to, investors can be quite good at like sending you new companies and saying, "Hey, like have a look at this product. What do you think?" And you might find a great new product out of that. They get a bit of feedback on, is this a good company that they might want to invest in? So I built a few of these relationships with people over the years where we've been kind of sending ideas back and forth. When we started Foxglove, I reached out to a few of them and said, "Hey, I'm going to build developer tools for robotics," and several of them said that was a crazy idea. It'll never work. And one of them was excited. So it only takes one. It's
It only takes
I
one.
like to say a fundraiser is it's like selling your house, right? Like you only need one buyer to actually like sell a house.
Yeah.
More is obviously better, in terms of creating a bidding war. But doing a fundraise is something where you need someone to lead it and someone to buy in. And then a little while after that, in 2022, we raised another round from Eclipse, and that one came together because Eclipse had been investing for years. Eclipse had been around since I think at least 2015, 2016, investing in hardware and manufacturing and robotics, and so they really understood our customer base. And another thing that I think is underappreciated, certainly I did not appreciate as a early founder, that a lot about fundraising is about it's really a search problem. It's about like talking to enough people until you find someone who already believes what you're about to tell them. And so it's not worth spending if you have a conversation and someone tells you that they don't believe it. Just that's the best kind of gift they can give you, because you're going to just like waste so much time trying to convince people of something that they're not excited about. Whereas if you find someone who then already had a bit of a thesis developing about like this should kind of exist, and then you find that person and then you kind of tell them like, hey, not only does this exist, but should this exist, but it does exist, and that you've spent even more time than them thinking about it. It works really well, right? So
Yeah.
so that was how our first couple rounds came together, was kind of a combination of existing relationships and or just like talking to enough people. Probably in the first year or so of the company, probably talked to, I don't know, at least 60 or 70 different investors, just trying to like find the ones that were excited about this. Um, and
Yeah.
that kept us going for quite a while until just recently. We just raised another round last month.
Congrats again about that. It's a very healthy round.
Thanks.
It's I'm assuming add-ons from existing investors and then some new ones.
Yeah, exactly. So the most recent round was led by Bessemer. That was, and then our existing investors. Everyone wants to continue putting
Yeah.
money into the business once it's successful. Usually,
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard from quite a few founders that sweet spot of about 70 VC
that's crazy.
conversation,
Yeah, you think? I mean,
isn't
yeah.
it?
If you've never been through that, it probably sounds insane, and you just have to get kind of like quite thick skinned too.
Yeah.
because a lot of them will tell you that your baby is ugly. I mean,
Yeah.
I have like literally like emails in my inbox from people saying that's a cute business, you know, not cute, but like that's a good business, but you're not going to make it to 5 billion in revenue. Like there's not
Yeah.
even enough. It's not even enough business here to get a small business off the ground, let alone a VC scale business. So I'll keep those and put them up on the wall, I think.
Love that. Yeah, you need those. You need those reminders. Um, so I'm curious about like different perspectives here and stuff, and want to dive into some other questions. I feel like we could just keep talking all day, but I'm also conscious of our time.
It's always
um,
the case.
I know robotics. It's obviously infamous for siloed data formats, inconsistent tooling, painful debugging, and stuff like that. Why do you think those problems persisted for so long? When, like you said, you spoke to other people and other companies that have all developed similar,
Yeah.
a big budget
It's
thing, or
yeah, it's just it's kind of this push and pull of a big company like a Waymo or a Tesla has a very billions of dollars to invest in this kind of thing. You can hire hundreds of people to build a lot of these different tools, and so a lot of this stuff gets built in house. For it to exist as a horizontal platform to support the industry, there needs to be a big enough industry to justify companies coming in and building these kind of platform things. So it's very much a push and pull, even with what we're doing, right? Like we're building platforms that I believe are critical for the industry to succeed. But the industry also has to be successful to justify what we're doing,
yeah,
building the platform. It has to be enough of a market out there for us to sell to. And so, you know, you kind of need these things to snowball. In particular, with data formats and things, I think just the robotics industry had come from a very kind of academic background where a lot of things had been produced that were good enough to demonstrate some kind of result for a paper or things like that. Um, but they hadn't really had like, you know, long-term professional software engineering investment in them, or even things that had kind of like long-term investment was like different people had come along, and you know, like Ross is a good example of a project that just like a lot of people have contributed to over the past 15, 20 years, but never really had like a large quorum of people like working full time on it, with a
yeah,
consistent sort of vision. And you know, no disrespect to like the people that have contributed to Rust, but like a lot of different people had contributed a lot of bits, and some of the bits were very well developed, and some of the bits had like a lot less just love and things like that over the years. So um, that was fairly common when we started Foxglove. A lot of the companies I spoke to had just built things in house. So like one of the most common stories I heard was that I'd go and talk to a company about how they're sort of dealing with their. My original question was like, how do you deal with sort of, you know, managing your log data and your debugging, and how do you do visualization and things like this? And then after a couple questions later, I would end up realizing like, how are you actually recording data? And a very large number of companies had created their own sort of bespoke binary logging formats and things like that, right?
yeah.
So I'm like, I'm had this idea of like, we're going to give you this great platform that's going to let you inspect all of this data, and then I realized that like every single customer has their own proprietary data format. It's just like you sort of realize what we were starting from, and so that was something that we ended
Yeah.
up. We created this MCAP. We created this data format called MCAP, which was an open standard. Um, and that was not something we planned to do at the start of the company. We planned, you know, our idea was to work at this higher level and build visualization tools and data infrastructure and things. But there was not even you know, any open data format that people were using to exchange data. So we kind of had to go and help
Mm,
solve that problem before we could even come back to the higher level stuff.
interesting. Interesting. Yeah, that's probably like an indication of why robotics tooling's kind of lagged behind a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yes.
mean, it has historically been a small industry. It's getting a
Yeah.
lot of investment now, which is great. But historically, it hasn't
Yeah.
been a big enough industry to justify people building, you know, building businesses to sell to create tools for it.
Yeah. Many teams say like Foxglove's become like a single pane of glass for robotics data. Was that the original vision, or was that part of like all of this learning what isn't there, learning how people are doing it, and trying to consolidate and make it just more user friendly?
That was very much part of the original vision. We had, as I said, with we'd come from working in the AV industry and seeing what robotics development looks like when we had probably over 1,000 people in software engineering at Cruise when I was
Wow.
when I left. It got even a lot bigger than that. But even when I left, it was probably over 1,000 people just in the software and autonomy orgs. And so seeing what the development workflow looked like at that scale had given a lot of insight into these things. Like, yeah, a single pane of glass for understanding what is going on in the vehicle is critical to so many stages of that kind of data life cycle. It's critical to understanding the behavior of the vehicle when you're in the car out on the road. It's critical to reviewing incidents and reviewing data and logs, and you're getting off and if there's any undesirable behaviors and things, being able to triage and root cause those things. And then it's critical to reviewing simulations. You go and run all of these simulations to see how the car would behave. Same thing. You need to bring that back and see in one place. So that was very much there from the early days, just being able to bring a lot of this, what were kind of disparate different data formats and different data
Yeah.
sources into one place.
How does Foxglove integrate with ROS or custom stacks, logs, sense data in a way that reduces those dev cycles?
Yeah, we have a lot of different. So, for example, we have a ROS package. It provides a ROS node. So, if you're using ROS, it's very easy. You can install our ROS node, and that'll give you a direct connection to the robot. We also support out of the box. We support ROS1 bag files with ROS2. ROS2 actually logs to MCAP by default now. So we created MCAP and have full support for that. So if you're using ROS, then it's generally a very easy, or really like any framework, but ROS is the most common one. It's generally a very easy kind of lift to get data into Foxglove. For those teams that, like I say, a good chunk of the industry that is not using ROS and they've built their own custom stack, and sometimes they've built their own custom log file formats. Thankfully, now more people are starting to use MCAP, and honestly, it doesn't have to be MCAP, but if you just use any open standard, that'll be nice. It makes it a lot easier for interoperability. We're seeing a lot more people though that have created sort of a non-ROS software stack, and so if they want to do things like streaming live telemetry data into Foxglove, we have Python and Rust and C++ SDKs they can pull in, but there is sort of some code that's going to have to get written if they want to integrate that. It's not quite as out of the box.
I guess interoperability is like a big thing right now in the industry. And as you think about scaling and becoming commercial and being part of like a bigger ecosystem, it's something to really be mindful of.
Yeah.
What are the biggest development bottlenecks that you consistently see across teams?
In robotics.
Yeah.
I feel like robotics is really death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's just, again, I draw the analogy to building SaaS businesses, where really, like, you want to build a vertical SaaS business or even an AI business these days, I guess is maybe the new analogy. You're going to take some off-the-shelf frameworks and some off-the-shelf libraries and some off-the-shelf infrastructure for hosting. And if you want to send emails, there's off-the-shelf tools for that. If you want to charge payments, there's off-the-shelf things for that. If you want to integrate an LLM, there's like half a dozen different great LLM APIs you can go integrate with. And so really what you're doing is like gluing together a few things that exist in a very novel way. And then again, you're solving a problem for customers. If you create a robotics company today, I mean, most robotics companies are creating, first of all, their own hardware platform. So they have mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, and they're creating their own PCBs, and they're doing a whole lot of manufacturing. And then moving up the stack, they're building the entire autonomy stack, and then they decide that they don't want to use ROS, so then they want to like build their own kind of, they're building middleware layers, and they're building all the stack, and they're building the autonomy, and they're building the models, and they've got their own controls. And then, like I say, then it sort of comes into where we are. They've got all this data infrastructure. Then they need to think about kind of, there's tools out there that will help with fleet management, but a lot of people decide they want to build their own fleet management and deployment and updates. And then that's just like the product development lifecycle. And then you've got like, the actual operations side of the business. You've got supply chain. You've got, finance teams. You're needing to think about like high capex and how are you like financing these robots that you're deploying. And then of course, and then you've got kind of the sales and the post sales. It's just in like the what kind of investors call the J curve, which is like how much you have to go kind of into the red before you can start like building a successful business, is so much deeper in robotics than it is in SaaS. In SaaS, like three people can hang out in a garage or something for a few months, a couple months, and then they can like launch a product and start making a bit of money, and you can validate this kind of market hypothesis really early. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge with robotics development, as far as it relates to startups getting off the ground, is that you can't really half-heartedly, you can't just kind of like do any small, quick, iterative market validation or
Yeah.
and I'm speaking in generalizations here, but like the companies that I see are really successful are usually experienced founding teams, much larger founding teams than a SaaS business. A SaaS business is like one or two people is fine. Like we started with two people, it's great. A lot of these robotics companies, I mean, you see companies with 8 or 9 people on the founding team, because there's just like so many skill sets that you need to be successful. And quite often, the teams that do take a whole lot of different experienced founders and they bring them together.
Yeah.
And then they raise like a significant, at least like a $10 million plus kind of seed round, sometimes into like multiple tens of millions of dollars. And then they really go for it. And they just like, these are the people that are kind of, being successful. They go after all of these things. They know how to do it. I don't necessarily think this is like healthy for the industry. Like I say, I'd really like the industry to get to the point where you don't need to do that, and where 2 or 3 founders in a garage can ship something and start making money. But the reality is, in robotics, it's really difficult to get a company off the ground, just because there's so many pieces that you need to get right. They all need to come together. You can't afford for any one of them. If you get all the other pieces and then like your autonomy stack doesn't work, you're screwed. So it's really
Yeah.
like, it's that is the biggest thing. I think the
Yeah.
biggest challenge in robotics. I'm
Let
sure you see
alone
the
once.
same thing of the
Oh
companies
yeah.
that the ones that scale quickly and that go that can get from zero to a product in customers' hands in like less than 2 years are usually quite experienced founding teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they've just had a lucky run. They've either got experienced founders who have good connections within, and sorry, not founders, investors that have good
Mm,
connections within an industry, can make intros, maybe some
right.
advisors, stuff like that. Because the truth is, and what we're seeing more and more now, is go to market for these companies. They might have nailed the product or
Right.
figured out a problem, right? But they just don't know how to price, how to sell, how to
Right.
get in front of the
Then
right
you
people.
just spent 2 years building the robot. Now we're like starting to think about how we're going to sell it. Yeah.
And your investors are like, so unit
Right.
economics, please.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it's like you said, death by a thousand paper cuts. I think that's the right terminology here. I hadn't thought about it like that, but there's so many things that go into it that have to work for you. Otherwise, you're going to make something great, not be able to sell it, or
Right.
not make money, and that's what you have to do at the end of the day as a business or whatever.
And
But
it's not really, you have to get, it's not really possible to sell a half baked product and really get that much feedback from it, because there's so many things
yeah,
where they're not going to want the product. They're not going to want it, not going to want it. Like until you can beat whatever their next best alternative is, which in a lot of cases is, might be human labor or things like that. And sometimes that's not even a great situation. Sometimes they're paying a lot
uh,
of money for staff. They're having to do 3 shifts a day. They have high turnover. Every 3 months, the person's quitting, and they're
right,
not happy with the human labor, but at least it's like very successful at achieving this task. And then you come in saying, I've got a robot that can do that. Um, but if you're not, multiple nines of reliability, if you're not able to do that around the clock, if you need if you need a whole person on call monitoring the robot, then you may as well have just had the person doing the job, kind of thing.
yeah.
You really need to like clear a pretty high hurdle before people are going to even like pay you anything.
For sure. Yeah, those first, beachhead clients, those first people who are willing to do a pilot to test are so important, especially if it's like a full-on hardware, software, new system. And that's what I've seen successful. Companies, they've found more collaborators that are customers that are able to be a bit lenient with them, give them real feedback,
Right.
let them be on site and work with them to define the actual offerings, the applications, the product before they go and rinse and repeat to sell to other people. Um,
Yeah.
those are key, but they're not always easy to find, right? So
Right, and again, that's why it really helps to have someone on the founding team that comes from the industry that you're trying to sell to and has a whole lot of connections. They have some friends that they can
right,
shoulder tap and say, "Can we come in and would you be a design partner for this and really help with that thinking?"
yeah,
But yeah, you're not going to again in SaaS. It's a little bit easier. I mean, so many YC startups. You hear stories of like YC software businesses that pivoted into whatever they're building, kind of just like stumbled through sort of through a series of iterative like talking to people, stumbled across a kind of specific problem and then ended up solving it. I see a lot less of that in robotics so far
yeah,
because you really need to get through this sort of iterative development and design partnership, and without those connections, people aren't even going to bother letting you in the door.
yeah,
I do really think that this is just because of where the robotics industry is in terms of its kind of maturity, though, right? Like coming back to where we started the conversation, I don't think in 10 years, I hope that this is not the case, right? I hope that we're in a case where people can get these businesses off the ground a lot quicker, and they can validate ideas, they can sort of go into new areas. There'll be a lot more sort of openness, I think, to trying robotics solutions in the future as well as people get more and more familiar with it. But that will be reinforced by the fact that people can get a working robot off the ground and into people's hand in a matter of months instead of a matter of years.
yeah, and reliable, you know.
Reliable.
Oh man, I just realized the time. We have so many things to speak
We'll do a
about.
follow up.
Okay. Yeah, we have to. We have to. Well, look, before we go, I wanted to talk more about Actuate. I wanted to talk more about what's
Yeah.
coming in the future. But I think what's important right now, you guys just raised, I know you are hiring. We talked a little bit about that offline. What traits do you look for when you're looking for engineers, or even people in general? We talked about go to market as well, things like that. It's obviously a unique business, unique industry. Is there something that you guys look for specifically?
Yeah, we are, like I said, we're building a data platform for robotics. So we really look anyone that has spent any time working in AV companies or robotics companies and has this experience, especially engineers that have worked on ML platforms or data infrastructure at autonomous driving companies or robotics companies. Foxglove is a great opportunity for because you can come to Foxglove and you can help us build exactly what you were doing before, but instead of helping just one company, you can help the entire industry, and you get to talk to people across the entire industry. You can get to talk to all of our customers and get to see kind of patterns and things. So we are very much looking for engineering, product design, anyone that has sort of spent time in these industries and has thoughts about how to build the platform that can support the whole industry. Also, we are hiring a go to market. Again, sales, marketing, we're building a developer tool, so we tend to have very technical marketing people, very technical sales. That is sort of incredibly challenging finding strong technical go-to-market people,
Yes.
especially in such a niche industry as robotics. But we've done okay so far.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, last question then. If you could clone one skill set or mindset across the company, across Foxglove, what would that be and why?
Skill set or mindset. I think my number one thing, and this is one of our company values, is proactive ownership.
Mm,
So there is, and this is incredibly important at an early stage startup, but really at any stage company. I think that a lot of people have been trained to kind of, I kind of, and I'm not good with sports analogies, but like the
you and me
difference
both.
that I would draw is like, I have a lemon tree at home, right? And like, if I like water the lemon tree once a month, it produces lemons, right? It's like it's gardening. You just kind of are like aware that a thing is there and it's happening, and you can kind of check in on it every now and then. And there are some things in life like this where you're very much just like a gardener of the thing. Um, a startup is not like that, and Foxglove is not like that. And so we have this concept of proactive ownership, which is more akin to playing your favorite sport and someone has just passed you the ball, and now you got to do something, right? Like don't sort of put your hand up and take responsibility for something unless you are planning to make it great. And if you are the DRI, which is directly responsible individual for anything, um, don't own it and garden it, right? Like proactively own it, push it forward, figure out what needs to happen. If it shouldn't be on your plate, find someone else to own it. But it's really about that kind of proactive mindset is something that we try to push across the company.
Yeah, much needed in a startup, but
Much needed
expectations set on
everywhere.
the culture. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Well, look, Adrian, thank you so much for
Yeah,
being on the show. Yeah, this was awesome. How
yeah,
can our
appreciate it.
listeners? Yeah, you're welcome. How can the listeners learn more about you, Foxglove, your roles, and follow along?
Yeah, check us out on LinkedIn. Check me out on LinkedIn, Adrian Macneil, or Twitter X, however you want to find us. Foxglove.dev/careers. We have about over 20 open roles right now, so check that out. Like I said, if you've worked anywhere close to autonomous driving or robotics, especially on the platform side, we would love to chat.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We'll link all of that in the show notes, and hopefully we'll get you on again soon for a follow up because
Yeah,
there's so
for
much
part
more.
two.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
All
Okay.
right. Thanks, Craig.